Hi, I'm Tony Russo, and this is In Case You Missed It from Kates-Boylston for the week ending Friday, April 11th, 2025. We've got all sorts of cool stuff coming up this week, including a little bit of a spiel on stereotypes and how and whether to fight them, some news about a pet crematory that really stepped up when stepping up was needed, and the introduction of some Australian Yimbys who are pro rather than con crematories in their community. We're also going to give you the heads up that scary AI we've been talking about is going live in Malaysia, and a little bit more of general funeral news from around the country, and I guess if we're including Australia, around the world. But before that, let's hear from our sponsor, Passages International. Looking for a way to honor your loved one while honoring the planet? At Passages, we specialize in eco-friendly funeral products made from renewable, biodegradable materials. Whether it's a stunning willow casket, a biodegradable urn for scattering, or our unique memorial keepsakes, we help create meaningful goodbyes that tread lightly on the earth. Join the movement toward greener funerals. Visit passagesinternational.com and discover how you can celebrate a life while protecting the planet for generations to come. Link in the show notes. I want to talk a little bit about stereotypes and whether and how to fight them. In the April edition of American Cemetery and Cremation, there is a story that I wrote about a direct aquamation company that has become a full-blown funeral home and tripled in size in the last year and a half or so. And it also will appear in the April 17th edition of Funeral Service Insider. Of course, if you are a subscriber, you'll have access to all of that on Sunday when the Sunday column comes out. But here's the gist of it. This was a young guy and a young woman who wanted to get more into the hospitality business, and aquamation just captured their imagination. And they were not impressed by their perceptions of what funeral industry is. And one of the things that they said when they were talking was about funeral directors being, old guys sitting around rooms in bad suits or something like that. It wasn't complimentary, and I was taken to task for including that description in the story, and I understand, and I included the letter so that you can get that person's perspective, and I'm not going to counter it. I am just going to talk about why I decided to include the derogatory language. First of all, it's not just because he said it. This is not a gotcha kind of thing. This is not anybody calling out. One of the things that we kind of pride ourselves on here, or at least I kind of pride myself on with Funeral Service Insider, is I want to do what I can to reflect what is going on. And if someone says that they got into the funeral business because the funeral business was old and boring and non-responsive, it's my responsibility to let you know that that's what people think. I write about, 80, 90 stories a year. And of those 80, 90 stories, 40 of them are about new businesses that people started because they had a bad, mediocre, or friction-filled experience with death care. And that's something that is worth knowing. And I also wanted to mention it because it's amusing. I do these roundtables and I host different webinars and things like that. And a lot of times there's a real concern about, the young goth type people who are trying to get into the industry. And, there's a certain way to dress professionally and there's a certain way to look professionally. And there is another side of that coin. And, when we go around and we're saying there are certain people who don't do the funeral service justice by the way that they color their hair or the way that they tattoo their faces or whatever it happens to be. That is true, but that doesn't stop them from starting their own funeral businesses and being successful by undermining the old stereotypes. So what's to be done? I spoke with Ryan Reyes on the recent podcast a little bit about that. And, we're all, not we, I don't leave the house unless I have to, but you guys are all out. Funeral directors are out in their communities, and that has got to be the beginning and the end of your presentation to the people that you are going to serve. You should project yourself the way that you want to be projected, but I think it's important to remember that when you don't project yourself at all, people are projecting things on you. And this couple, as I said, they hired a funeral director. They hired kind of they hired a funeral director, and then he died, and they had to hire another one. But they hired the funeral director because they wanted to open a funeral home. They had started with essentially an art gallery with an aquamation machine in it that just captured people's imaginations. And so it's something to at least consider, that as things are changing, know that there are other people who are trying to find ways to do funerals the way they want. And saying that you're willing to do whatever a family wants is of course what you ought to be saying, and I think that's good and appropriate. But delivering that message on a wider scale is something that is probably worth thinking about, because it's getting easier and easier to get into funeral service, and there are people who want things their own way. And if they can't get it, they're starting businesses. And again, this is something I've been saying. I mean, I remember I spoke with Effie Anolik, I believe, from Afterward, and we just did a thing with a company called Cadence, and it's just a litany of young people who were shut out of the way they wanted their loved ones' funerals to be, who have the wherewithal and the ambition to change funeral service. And it's probably something to not ignore. But anyway, if you're a subscriber, you'll get that story on Sunday. And if you're not, you should subscribe. If you're an American Cemetery subscriber, you will be able to find the letter to the editors attached on the American Cemetery and Cremation website as well. And a link to all of those, if you care to subscribe, is in the show notes. Griffith is a town in Australia that has recently decided to buy its own crematory, or buy a crematory for a funeral company that's in town, so that funeral company can begin doing cremations. Griffith has a large Sikh population, and that is the preferred method of disposition for the Sikhs. Unfortunately, there was no crematory in that town, so one of the funeral homes went to the city and said, listen, we can't afford to get one. If you can help us get one, then we'll be partners, essentially. And so the town is going to get a share of every cremation done in that crematory. And what's exciting about that is I always report on all of these towns who rise up and they're like, what about the children? What about the water? What about the fact that I'm uncomfortable having something new in my poor little neighborhood? I've said all I need to say about the Not in My Backyard Brigade and my contempt for them. But here it's a community that is like, well, this is an important part of our religion. This is an important part of the way that we culturally engage with death. And that is what is important to us. And to have the town actually respond, it's just nice to see occasionally the government stepping up and saying, yes, we will accept that. This is what you'd like, and we will help you do it. So link to that story in the show notes. It's worth reading. I'm going to read you the headline in this story. It is 3 Bay Area cemeteries ordered to stop operations, sparking confusion among community. And it is a story about 3 cemeteries that have been, ordered to stop operations. And the first part starts the way you would expect it to start. It's, it looks like the cemeteries are overgrown. It's hard to get people in them. We don't know whether or not they're being taken care of. We think that they're closed. But then farther down in the story, they speak with the cemetery owners who say that, no, they're there. They've got money and they're happy to continue to provide a service. So I don't know if this is really just a case of they let their grounds go, a little too much, a little too long over the winter, and, people are upset about it, or if they're maybe converting to, less gas usage or whatever. I don't know. I'm going to look into it, but this just came across my desk this morning, and I thought I'd like to share it because I think that you do well to take a look at it and see precisely what the issue is, because the cemetery board made the order, but both of the cemetery owners, 3 cemeteries, 2 owners, as I understand it from the story, objected. They appealed. They said, no, we can prove that we have money and that we're operational. And I don't know if it's a disconnect or, it's just that the cemetery board was nervous about the way the cemetery looked. And I'll tell you, as harsh as I've been on cemetery boards and as bad as I feel for these cemetery owners, this is really one of those err on the side of caution. If these people are going to, if the cemetery board is legitimately worried that people won't be able to get their loved ones interred, they should stop it. And I think it's right that they erred on the side of caution. However, if the owners have come forward and said, no, here's our proof, we're still functional and solvent and operational, I think it needs to be withdrawn quickly. And that's why I wanted to report on this now. And hopefully later on in the coming week, I'll have an update, which I'll be happy to share on either on In Case You Missed It or in Funeral Service Insider. But there's a link to this original story in the show notes. Check it out. So since I've started here, it's been 2 years, 3 years, coming up on 4. I think I'm finishing my 3rd year as we speak. I was privileged to see the implant recycling VR Rainbow presentation that included a test scenario that had been being proffered abroad. And it was, if you haven't seen the video, it's easy to look up. If I can find it, I'll throw a link in the show notes. But it is this bereaved mother interacting with her child, with her dead child. And, the child is there and she can see the child through her VR glasses, and she's asking the child questions and the child is responding. The AI generated child is responding. And that always gets the conversation going because it is horrifying and fascinating to watch all at the same time. And it certainly gets people, enervated one way or the other. Well, this week, a Malaysian company launched their AI memorialization that will allow people to do it. So as the folks at VR Rainbox and Implant Recycling have been saying for literally years, if the funeral industry doesn't step up and do it, the tech industry will. And it looks like the tech industry may have gotten there first in Malaysia. So whether and to what degree a funeral service will respond, if and when it comes to the United States, is something worth thinking about. So check the show notes, check that story out of Malaysia. And certainly I'll link to the VR Rainbox stuff, because I believe that they have a good copy of that interaction between mother and dead child. And it's something to behold. So anyway, it's here. They said it was coming, and now it has arrived. And now we're left with trying to think about what that means going forward. I'm always hesitant to talk about, crematory scandals unless there's a reason, unless there's a point, I guess, involved. And so a couple weeks ago, I saw this report that someone's dog had been found on the side of the road after it had been delivered to a crematory. The name of the crematory that had the dog was called Loving Care Pet Funerals, and it is in Catonsville, Maryland. It's a suburb of Baltimore. And I was really just going to let it go as just another, bad actors acting badly. There's very little you can do about that. But this week, another one, Charm City Pet Crematory and Funeral Services, reached out to all of the families who have ever done business with Loving Care Pet Funerals and said, if you're nervous, if you're worried about whether the cremated remains you received from Loving Care are your pets or not, bring them to us. We know how to check. We can check and we can make sure. And it was just the owner's name is Zoe Robinson Budreski. And I just wanted to shout her out because it's a really cool thing to do. I mean, she doesn't have to. But she reaches out and she says, hey, let me at least give you peace of mind. And this notion of reaching out to families to give them peace of mind is just, it's laudable, and I'm glad that they did it, and I'm happy to tell you about it. And there's a link to the story in the show notes. So one of the true downsides of working on just a weekly, like not even a daily, is that it is increasingly difficult to report on tariffs and how they'll affect the funeral industry as a whole. I spoke again a couple months ago when all of the tariff funds started with several casket companies. Many of them were already making their things in America. I spoke with Starmark and Titan specifically, I remember, who are doing their thing in America only. And I spoke with two other ones who were importing parts. And they had said that after the supply chain debacle, they kind of moved things around and didn't expect the tariffs to hurt them too much. And then since then, everybody else got tariffed and then everybody else got untariffed. And it's tough to kind of nail down a narrative. And so, I'm going to do my best. But for now, if you have any stories about how tariffs are affecting you, I would love it if you reached out and talked to me about it. I put out a call on LinkedIn as well, and I'll follow up with some of the casket companies. But I think the uncertainty might be worse than the tariffs as far as not only pricing, but, getting people to, plan to pay for this casket now. So I would love to hear, what's going on the ground, because I am not on the ground and I do not know. So if you have any tariff information that you would like to share with me, I would love to have it. I'll be making some phone calls, and hopefully in the next couple of weeks, if anything kind of levels out to to something that I'm not afraid to committing to paper today because it might be false tomorrow, then I'll get a story out then. But, just letting you know, I'm keeping my eyes on it, and if I can get a straight answer, I will give it to you. And if you get any straight answers, I would love to hear them so that I can amplify or at least share them. That will do it for this time. I have provided a link in the show notes to my LinkedIn page, and the reason is that's where I put all the stories, and there were way more stories than I could get to for this week. And if you're interested in some of the other things that we're looking at, that is the best place to find it. But for now, in case you missed it, has been a Kates-Boylston production. It was written and edited by me, Tony Russo. Please subscribe wherever you're listening now, or follow if you are on Apple. Subscribe on YouTube by hitting the little bell. If you're watching along on YouTube, that is fantastic. If you're on YouTube podcasts and listening along, that is fantastic as well. However you get to us, is the way that we would like to be gotten to. If you have any feedback, please share it with me. You can call and leave a voicemail at 732-746-0233, extension 709. That is 732-746-0233, extension 709. Or you can email me by following the link in the show notes to the post page where you will find my email address. I'd love to have your feedback. If you have any suggestions for people we could have on the show, or things we could do on the show, or stories that you would like to see covered, that would be fantastic. But that will do it for this time, and we will catch you next time on In Case You Missed It.